All right, folks, welcome in. It's the latest edition of the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. We are back. I am the somewhat capable co-host, TJ Reeves. Hello to Mike Gill, my colleague here on the LWS Media Content. Mike and I love chopping it up, talking sports media. You find us every day of the week, Monday through Friday, by the way, talking sports media. You found the full pod, whether you're only hearing us or you're also seeing us through social media. Mike, again, does a great job with his program, The Sports Bash, on 97.3 ESPN, the over-the-air station in Atlantic City, the greater Philadelphia market. He's on every afternoon there, but love working with him. Again, find him at the Mike Gill Show on Twitter, on Blue Sky. Find me at Buck Sideline Guy on Twitter X, and also Mike's YouTube page to see what we look like doing the show. If you're only hearing us, if you're seeing us, you want to be part of the podcast feed because there's great content there as well that may not be on the video. So go to Apple, Spreaker, Spotify for LWS media content. We love it. Last Word on Sports Media podcast. All right, Mike Gill, good to be with you. A lot to go over here on this Tuesday off the championship games in college football. We now know the 12 teams in the college football playoff. NFL narrowing down with massive audience, massive interest. We got controversy about football guys being asked to comment on Juan Soto's baseball free agency. You got Philadelphia media controversy. We got a buffet, my friend. Good to be with you.
Yeah, a lot of stuff happening. Of course, it's the holiday season, and we know that college football kind of takes center stage. I think the reveal show, which, that's a pretty big deal for ESPN to cut into Sunday NFL Countdown for that one Sunday a year where they give the college football reveal that last hour of Sunday Countdown. And that was some interesting stuff there. We got the college football playoffs. We have college football. Are we seeing the end of the conference championship games?
Yeah.
There was one pundit who said this is inevitable. They are going away, and it's just a matter of when. So did the college football playoff show the reveals this year? We got a story that we're going to get into, but they held on to the college conference championships for at least one more year by not bouncing SMU, because SMU could have said, well, what are we playing that game for? If we lose, it bounces us out. We were in the week before. So very interesting how much longer these college football championship games are going to
have. Fundamentally, ESPN is at the front end, in the middle, and the back end of the entire sport of college football, making the pre-conference matchups, the televising of the sport. They are intertwined with the playoff, with the selection committee, with the selection show that you saw with the final reveal. They're in this beginning to end. Their fingerprints are all over it. And there's too much money from Disney, ESPN, and ABC flowing through. They're not going to get rid of those championship games because of the money that can be made and the fact that they've now also connected automatic bids that if you win any of the big four, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 title games, you're automatically in the playoff. That's how a 3-loss Clemson team played their way in. That's how a 2-loss Arizona State team played its way in, winning the game. So there's the counter argument. Go ahead.
In the future, you're going to either have to say the conference championship team and the team that makes it there. Your goal is to get to the conference championship. You should not be penalized for reaching that goal.
But wait a minute. The only counter to that is if you've got a couple of 2-loss or 3-loss teams, there can't be a guarantee that they're both in. This, by the way, is what they want.
You have a team that the problem we have is we are prioritizing conferences over other conferences.
Right.
If you're going to let them all in, you have to look at them as equals.
I understand on that. And by the way, this is what they want. The powers that be in college football have wanted this for the last 40 years. They want arguing. They want screaming. They want debate. It fuels the sport. It fuels the interest in the playoffs and the matchup. They've expanded the playoff now to 12 teams. I mean, part of the problem is you went from 4 to 12. And people like me said this for the last year. You're diluting and cheapening the end of the regular season where losses would eliminate you. In past years, that as soon as the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States lost a game at the very end of the year, that meant you're out. Well, notice with the exception of Alabama, they all still found their way in despite a late season loss for Clemson, for Ohio State. Penn State lost the Big Ten championship game. They're still in. Texas lost the SEC title game. They're still in. You mentioned SMU, first year in the Atlantic Coast Conference. They lost the championship game. They're still in. Because you have to have 12 teams. You have to have 12 teams, and you got to have enough to fill it out.
That's one of the problems. There's not 12 deserving teams.
Right.
We knew that. There wasn't 4. In years past, we couldn't find 4 deserving teams.
Right.
So they expanded to 12 non-deserving teams. And this year, there's not even a legitimate, clear-cut number 1 that you can say, well, they're the best, and then everybody else. Oregon, while very good, I don't know that anybody looks at them and says, well, they're head and shoulders the best. The 2 seed, Georgia, their quarterback's hurt. Last year, the problem was if your quarterback was hurt, you got bounced, Florida State. So, look, adding 12 teams meant you're arguing about 12 mediocre teams, good teams, no great teams here. But looking forward, South Carolina has 3 losses. Do we think if South Carolina played SMU, they'd be favored in the game? Of course they would. They would likely be favored over SMU. But you set the precedent by saying all these conferences get an automatic bid, which means you also have to then take out all this nonsense and say, look, your goal is to reach the conference championship game. If you reach your conference championship game, you can't have a team that wasn't good enough to win their conference or get to their conference championship game
go in instead of them, right? And that was the Alabama argument. And so while we're on this subject, we made mention of it. It obviously was reverberating just before that reveal show at noon Eastern time that Brett McMurphy of the Action Network had broken. He's the premier college football insider. I'm sorry for whoever else you might want to tout. He's the guy. He's the one that broke, confirming that SMU is in, Alabama is out. It obviously rankled ESPN. As I mentioned, and I've known Brett for 25 years. I've had him on this podcast. We're about to play a comment from him in a few moments. He's gracious to come on with us. Brett worked for ESPN, and they fired him during one of their mass layoffs back about 3 or 4 years ago. They didn't value him the same way that they value Adam Schefter or that they valued Woj and now Shams in the NBA insider world, Jeff Passan in the baseball world. And so if he's off breaking stories for a different outlet on social media and online, that's your fault that you used to have him. And by the way, weigh in, please, Mike Gill on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. It's his job. It's what the Action Network pays him to do, is to break these kind of stories and get attention for them. Yes?
Of course. I mean, who does anybody think they are to tell this guy he can't break a story working for a different outlet? I mean, come on. I can't say, hey, you work for someone else, don't break that story. It's preposterous to have that.
What I love is when we get to like the NFL world or the NBA world, and we're not sure if Adam Schefter is going to be the first one to tell us, like, for example, that Rex Ryan's coming back to the NFL and be a head coach when he works for ESPN's NFL coverage, or if Woj was not going to tell us that, hey, Jeff Van Gundy is going to leave the broadcast booth hypothetically and go be a head coach again. They work for the network to tip this off and to put this out there. It was always fascinating to me when they weren't the first ones to report the story. But in any event, let's hear from Brett McMurphy. This was fascinating on this podcast. This is why you got to be locked in. I didn't just want to direct people, hey, go back and find it. I found it. I brought it here, and through the technology, Mike's going to play it. So I asked Brett at this time about a year and a half ago about breaking stories, about being lied to, that he's had experience in the past about being lied to by sources, by schools, by athletic directors, by coaches, conference commissioners. How do you sift through the lies is how I posed it to him. And he has always maintained publicly that he has got multiple, 5 of them. He's got 5 what he considers his Fab 5 sources that if he goes to, he believes it's rock solid information, whether anybody else has it or not. If one of those 5 tells him, and one of the 5 obviously was one of the ones telling him SMU is in, then he goes to them. So that sets up the comment you're about to hear. Here is Brett McMurphy of the Action Network, previously on this podcast, talking about how you sift through lies, disinformation, how you get the story and get it out first. This is in his own words. All right. So your reaction to hearing Brett McMurphy explain, I mean, that's some great stuff on the inside on how he gets a lot of these scoops and how you have to be ready for the lies, Mike Gill.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great insight there. I once broke a story, and I never want to do it again. It was kind of by accident, and the stress level that I had, I can't even imagine these guys at this level doing it. And he mentions, these, because so many people have an agenda. You're looking at it from, for instance, I'm here in the Philadelphia market, and right now, one national reporter is saying that the Phillies are all in on Garrett Crochet. There's another national guy that's saying, nah, not a lot going on there. So obviously one source has an agenda to say, come on, get Philly involved here. And the other agenda source is, we don't want Philly calling because my guy wants to go. I mean, whatever the background is, the source is trying to use the media member to get the message they want out there. And that's why you hear conflicting reports sometimes, because these guys have different sources, and those sources have an agenda for their client or whatever. So it is hard. And that's where McMurphy says, I have my 5 guys that I trust with everything. If it's not one of those 5, then I have to get it from somebody else. And that is where it's a very tricky game. And I give these guys a ton of credit. I said, I broke a story one time. It was kind of by accident. I never want to do it again. It was the worst 45 minutes of my life. Having someone who's way more well-known in that genre confirm it by saying Mike Gill was right. That is the story.
Ultimately, you got it right, though, so bravo.
Got it right.
What was the subject? It was a Phillies
There was a Phillies player who had broke his hand in spring training, and the Phillies...
You found out about it?
Yeah, I found out about it from a couple of people. I had happened to have been at spring training, had heard some murmurs, and then got some information and kind of innocently figure that everybody knew and tweeted it out. Well, here, I'm a member of the media and I'm the first person. And then there was a report conflicting that said that he was getting an MRI and that the MRI was negative. So people were blasting me like, a higher profile guy who had said that the MRI was negative and saying, you're an idiot. This guy said it was negative. So there's a lot that goes on there. So McMurphy at that level, so he comes out and says SMU is in and Alabama is out before the TV show goes on the air. The SMU coach comes on and says, well, we knew about 35 minutes ago. You really strung us along here. Basically giving them a little gouge of this whole dog and pony show you put on is unnecessary. And quite frankly, I watched the show. I was watching. I just wanted to see. That thing could be done in 10 minutes. I mean,
of course.
They don't into the NFL countdown show.
But you understand what we said at the beginning. This is theirs, beginning to end. This is their big reveal. This is their answer to the CBS Selection Sunday night show for the NCAA tournament. It's only 12 teams, not 68 teams. So they were trying to milk it. And full disclosure, I was working the Buccaneers Raiders game on the radio. So I was not able to sit and watch that show. But I can't believe, as you just said, it took 25, 30, 35 minutes for the reveal. They got what they deserved on that, Mike, as far as I'm concerned. They're trying to milk that on the info.
I went to watch and I wanted to see it, and I was bored out of my mind. It was too much. It was come on, let's get this going here. It was too much.
By comparison, the Selection Sunday night show, they usually have it all revealed in about 25 minutes. But again, that's 68 teams with all of the matchups that they have to input in and go over it one by one by one. They have to go over 34 matchups. UConn's playing this team. Kansas is playing this team. Michigan State is playing this team. And you got to do it 34 times for them. So it does take longer than what this was. So we gave it a lot of time. Once the games get going on the field, it'll be interesting. Again, it's not this weekend. It's next weekend, the 21st, to build up to the 4 home games for the 8 quarterfinal teams that will move into the bowl games and the byes. So stay tuned here for the 12 teams that are moving into the quarterfinals. 4 of them will advance. But they ultimately want all of this screaming and arguing because it fuels millions and millions of people to watch. All right, where do you want to go next on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast? TJ and Mike Gill here. What else?
Let's stick with ESPN's coverage of baseball. Doug Mankiewicz, a former Twin, he's in the media. He ripped them because of their coverage of the Juan Soto signing, which the voices to give the coverage was Shannon Sharp and Rex Ryan, the former Jets head football coach, former Ravens defensive coordinator. Yes, that Rex Ryan. Major League Baseball, it's the hot stove. This is their season. Guy signs a $765 million contract. They can't find Tim Kirkchin. They can't.
So that I'm clear, I did not see this. This was on Monday morning you're talking about?
Yeah,
or was this?
This was basically all of the talking head shows, your first takes, your get-ups. Basically, they don't have a baseball guy on hand to call, so they're just discussing it with the panel that happens to be on the show that day. Rex Ryan is on the Monday show, Get Up with Mike Greenberg. It's generally Dan Orlovsky, Rex Ryan. Shannon Sharp is on First Take, so they are the baseball voices when this big moment occurs.
But Jeff Passan had basically broken the story on Sunday night. How do they not find him and stick him in remotely in this remote world of video like what we're doing right here? How do they not stick him in on video?
I imagine
that's bizarre.
I imagine they did on SportsCenter, for the initial breaking. But the next day reaction of this is the football conversation. And instead of bringing a pass it in for a segment, I guess Mankiewicz was going off and saying, look, you got Shannon Sharp and Rex Ryan talking about the biggest contract in baseball history. Now, to ESPN's credit, they reached out to me about having somebody on from the winter meetings today. They offered me Carl Ravitch. They offered me Tim Kirkchin. They offered me Doug Glanville. So I will be having
on your radio show you're talking about. Yes.
Yes. I will be having Doug Glanville on to discuss the winter meetings, Philly stuff. But on the panel shows that they have, they couldn't get somebody in there to kind of say, hey, give us 5 quick minutes on Juan Soto's historic contract.
So now we have 2 examples of ESPN being their own worst enemy on that. Where how do you not have one of your baseball guys, like you mentioned, standing by? All right, what else here? I know you've got a Philadelphia controversy that you want to address as well while we talk sports media.
I want to throw this to you because I'm here and you don't know about this, okay? So the Eagles play the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. Carolina's, not a great team. They've been playing better. Spread is 13.5, so it's a game that Philadelphia should probably handle. They end up winning the game 22-16. Not a great day. Jalen Hurts, not great numbers. 108 yards, 14 of 18 passing, 2 touchdowns. After the game, A.J. Brown is asked, what's wrong with the offense? And he gives a terse passing. 1 word, period. He was followed up.
As in not throwing him the ball is what you mean. Yes, continue.
I think people took it as the guy who's throwing the ball is a problem. So there was some more back and forth. Is it the offense? Is it difficult that we run the ball so much and that there's no rhythm? He says it's extremely difficult. Later on that night, Brandon Graham, who's injured and out for the rest of the season, but is a veteran voice on that team, he goes on WIP radio in Philadelphia. He has his players show. And he basically says, look, there's a problem between 11 and 1, and they got to figure it out, and, blah, 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 blah. Well, about an hour later, he sends a text out to all the media members and saying, I misspoke. I didn't know what I was talking about. There's not a problem there. He then calls into the radio show this morning at about
Tuesday morning.
He calls into WIP radio to then reconfirm that he did not have accurate information. Listening to another Philadelphia radio station, Jeff McClain from the Inquirer said he knows that there was back channels telling him that they had to change that messaging to get on the phone with, and that's why he sent these text messages out to Tim McManus of ESPN and yada, yada. Now, today's sports radio shows, I do not go on for another 45 minutes, so I don't know what my audience is going to be like. But listening to some Philadelphia audience, they are blaming the media, saying the media has created this rift.
Okay. So you're ready for my take? I've been doing this for a long time.
That's why I didn't want to give you the details. I wanted to lay it out here.
Okay.
Because this happens in Philly all the time.
Okay.
It's what derailed their season last year, essentially.
Oh, yeah. With dissension in the locker room. All right, so there's 2 or 3 components. The first component is we got media availability around the player, and the player is the one bringing this up. It's not the media creating that. The player is saying passing game and is saying the stuff about running more than passing. Then you have a player, injured or not, on the team who is taking it a step further. He's doing what you just talked about on this podcast. He's becoming a reporter, and he is reporting. Usually the locker room stuff stays in the locker room. He's reporting there's a rift, and the media jumps on that. I mean, that's red meat to the Philadelphia media. The Philadelphia media loves to make up things that doesn't have any validity. Here you have a player saying, Brandon Graham, that there is a rift. That's a story. That's a huge story. So, yeah, they got to him. They told him backtrack, apologize, get that off. That's not the media's fault, to answer your question. The public wants to know. You're trying to get to the bottom of it. Brandon Graham told you the truth. Brandon Graham confirmed what A.J. Brown was complaining about. That's not the media's fault. There's my answer. And it gives you great fodder for your show later today and all week. Welcome to Philly and the combative sports media and athletes and fans. There you go.
So real quick, I do have the bite. I would like to play this for you.
All right.
So you can hear Brandon Graham. This is Brandon Graham. He is on WIP. He does a weekly show up there, which is in our market. It's about an hour from us. So they're Philadelphia market. We're the Atlantic City market.
Massive sports radio station with hundreds of thousands of people listening, and now millions are going to hear this when he says this, right?
This is the heritage station in the town. This is the station, everybody, for Eagles. They are the home of the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's what he said.
The person that's complaining need to be accountable. And I'm just being honest. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he noticed. I don't know the whole story, but I know that one is trying. And I mean, 11 could be a little better with how he responds to things. And they was friends before this. It's like, man, but things have changed. And I understand that because life happens. But it's the business side that we have to make sure that we don't let the personal get in the way of the business. And that's what we got to do better as right now, because we know it's an issue. Everybody's seeing some things, but we need to be able to talk things out as men. You know what I'm saying? But we need to let personal stuff go and let's get right for this game, because, man, it's like a lot of stuff. Most of the time, it's just a conversation that just need to be had. But the person with the problem got to want to talk to the person other than other.
By the way, there is nothing wrong with anything he just said. It's great insight. And he said it two different ways. It's up to those guys to work it out. And in his opinion, number 11, meaning A.J. Brown, has got to be better on working it out. So, again, that's not the media's creation. That's him being honest. Maybe he's being too honest there about the locker room, but that's great stuff. That's great fodder for what you do. That's not the media's fault, Mike. Just one more time.
Yeah, and then I do want to follow up, because last night, about an hour after this happened,
and they got to him,
Dennis, who is the Eagles beat reporter, NFL Nation for ESPN, just spoke with Brandon Graham. He clarified his comments about Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown's relationship. Quote, "I just assumed and made me out to look even worse because I had it all wrong, and now people are going to run with that part. I really just want to win, man. I want brothers to be able to just hash it out. I'm going to make sure I apologize to both of them." As for the message Grant was trying to convey, he says, "I wasn't trying to be divisive. I just want us to use the media I didn't want us to use the media in a bad way. I can't do that either. If I've got something to say, I've got to go to people too. I made a mistake and I assumed that it was something that it wasn't. I just want to win so bad, and I don't want to use the media when we can talk about it and we can fix the problem ourselves. I didn't add to it in a good light. My bad." So I want to ask you, because you're around a team, and I don't want you in trouble either, but does the PR get to him and say, "Yo"?
Sometimes, or his own agent will get to him and say, "You got to backpedal here." Or Jalen Hurts got to him and said, "We don't need this. We don't need you airing out what's in the locker room." Buccaneers had this problem, and the players are long gone, with Keyshawn Johnson and Warren Sapp being on the same team in the late 90s and the early 2000s, where it was obvious that Keyshawn was saying divisive things about the offensive coordinator publicly on the radio. Different age, too. We're talking about 25 years ago, no social media. But Keyshawn was using his own radio show, to blast the Bucs offense, not getting him the ball. And he was a divisive figure within the locker room. And Warren Sapp actually spoke out big time about him being divisive. And Sapp even makes mention in his book about what a bad teammate, divisive guy. So this was it's something I can relate to. It's definitely almost 25 years ago, but this is the exact same thing where they were having problems, and they both said on the record that the difference is they never blamed the media. They were using the media. And it's never a good sign when you're using the media to do this, is the answer to your question. So that's just fascinating that you're dealing with that controversy, not just today, but it sounds like all week. And this is on a team that's now, 11-2,
and
right?
won 9 straight games.
And they're winning all the time. But will it come unraveled like it did last year at the hands of my BUCCANEERS Go Bucks in the playoff game? That's what they're trying to prevent. They're trying to get it under control. So there you go.
By the way, yes, 9 straight games he won. And it's so funny because Donovan McNabb was a guest on the radio. He's talking about this whole situation, to which Terrell Owens got involved and said, whoa, this is pretty, coming from you, saying that the two men need to talk this out. Owens and McNabb had a beef, back in 2004 and split the whole team apart. So never a dull moment here.
And again, that is not the media's fault. The media is asking the questions after the game. Brandon Graham knows he's on a live radio show talking to the media. It's not the media's fault.
The fans and the media, the split is the fans expect the media sometimes to be a fan like them. And they're saying, you're asking these questions and it's causing divisiveness. If you didn't ask those questions,
but it's the media's job. We know the truth. It's the media's job. You're talking about, as a fan, if you've got that take, you're talking about the Eagles public relations or the Buccaneers public relations or the Yankees or the Lakers or Alabama football or Duke basketball. That's what they have a public relations or sports information department for, is to put their spin on things and to try to squash negative things, negative stories. That's a whole nother topic, by the way, on trying to squash it. But somebody clearly got to Brandon Graham. It was probably Jalen Hurts, and it may have been Nick Sirianni, saying, you've got to go and set this straight because we don't need this. We don't need this in the public and in that market. I think
it was Big Dom.
Whoever it was. All right, we got to get out of here in a few moments.
The guy last year who got suspended.
The security guard.
Security guard, yes. All right, some ratings. Let's go to the ratings.
Let's do that and then get out of here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast, because I know you got to get to a live show and all the screaming callers about the Eagles' dissension while they've won 9 in a row.
Bills, Rams, 24 million. Most watched telecast of the week on any network for the NFL. That was on Fox. Sticking with Fox. Mountain West Championship game Friday night, over 3 million viewers. It's the most watched Mountain West Championship game on any network in history, and had over 3.5 million between 9 and 9:15.
The drama again of, is Boise State in the playoff? Can they win the game? They've got a Heisman candidate in Ashton Genty. They did win the game, so it obviously helped that audience immensely, Mike.
Big time, yes. And the thirst for football, even on a Friday night. And I know out of home, I was out of my home watching that game with a big crowd. I was too. Kansas City, huge ratings. Kansas City, LA, 22.8 million for Sunday Night Football. Another big rating there, and the Doink Kick wins it, and they get 22 million for Sunday Night Football there.
And a great call real quick by Mike Tirico on a doink for the division that he came up with off the top of his head. How many more crazy ways can the Chiefs win at the end of the game with a blocked field goal, a doink kick, a bad snap for the Raiders on the Black Friday game? It's been nuts at the end of their games.
Every week, it seems like they're finding a different way to win. Let's stick with the ratings, because the Lions and the Packers on Thursday Night Football, massive numbers for Amazon Prime. Almost 18 million streamers watching the game. 17.2. It peaked at over 18 million, and it beat Monday Night Football again. So the Thursday night stream is becoming a part of our
and a dramatic close game. Brand names, the Lions and Packers, and their rivalry in a close game helped that out also. And we'll be curious. We need to kind of end on this. I'm curious on what the Georgia Texas SEC title game rivalry did. That win the Saturday. We don't have those numbers while we're doing this show live and on the audio podcast. Just hang in there. We'll have a follow-up on the Daily tomorrow, and it'll be out there on social media. But I'm wondering, did the Georgia-Texas game that bled into early prime time Saturday, did it end up with 12 million, 14 million, overtime game. Who knows? How did the Oregon close game with Penn State, the Big Ten game do? We got to wait for those ratings to come out. One other thing I wanted to add, speaking of Monday Night Football, at the time we're doing this live on Tuesday afternoon, and depending on whenever you're hearing us, we'll wait for the ratings outcome on the Cowboys-Bengals, but basically that was the end of the Cowboys' chances. Any slim hope they had of winning a bunch of games and getting into the playoffs is now basically gone. And it's not just that they lost, but how they lost, Mike Gill, on the 31st anniversary of Leon Lett Thanksgiving Day and the sleet and snow in Dallas, touching a blocked field goal and giving Miami new life for Don Shula and company on a second field goal that won the game. And it's tremendous to go back and relive NBC with the late Dick Enberg and Bob Trumpy calling all of that in real time and how great they were on the call of that. Here it happened again with the Cowboys in the final 2 minutes, tie game, block a punt, and one of their players touches the ball again. The Bengals recover. The Bengals eventually get a touchdown for Jamar Chase to win the game and croak Dallas's slim playoff hopes. And how about Brad Sham, the legendary Hall of Fame Dallas Cowboy voice, is on the call on both plays. The Leon Lett play in the block field goal in 93 and 31 years later on the block punt last night against the Bengals that they touched and gave it back to Cincinnati for the win. Troy Aikman's involved in both plays, Mike Gill. He's on the field on the NBC video hugging Michael Irvin. They're jumping up and down, and then the looks on their faces when they look and see that Miami's recovered a fumble and the refs are going to give them the ball is priceless. And Aikman was on the call right away last night, and they were talking about Leon Lett right away on Monday night and the touched ball. How wild. 31 years later, Aikman's a commentator involved in it, Mike Gill.
Yeah,
wow.
the synergy of the whole thing. And then
Wow.
you recollecting that Sham is on the call for both the Cowboys, radio
broadcasts, right?
Radio now. I mean, just wild that it'll happen. And then Jerry Jones after the game saying, well, maybe you shouldn't have blocked the punt. I mean, what?
The Cowboys are going to have the ball at like the 35-yard line if they don't touch it. And they've got a chance to win the game in a tie game with at least a field goal. And Jerry Jones is involved in both plays. He's down on the field with his arms up, celebrating 31 years ago, thinking they had won the game with a blocked punt by one or blocked field goal by one. And now he's the owner 31 years later when they lose again. Amazing.
All right, let's get to this weekend's games real quick. You got Joe Davis, Greg Olson on Washington Saints, Kenny Albert, Jonathan Vilma on those Cowboys and the Panthers, Chris Myers, Mark Schlereth, Jets and Jags. By the way, Chris Myers did a podcast with Brian Curtis of The Ringer on the press box. Really good, insightful in the career of Chris Myers. I encourage people to go listen to that.
He's been on with us before. He wants to come on again because he's got his new book out as well. So we'll try to get him on, Mike. Keep going.
Yeah. Myers and Schlereth, Jets and Jags. Kugler and Daryl Johnson, Bengals, Titans. The big game, Steelers, Eagles. It's a Fox 425 game of the week. Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady. I'll get to listen to Brady giving a little critique there. He's getting a little bit better. I mean, I think 14
He was
weeks
losing his voice Sunday in the Rams-Bills game. He had to have the lozenges. I've been there. I know you've been there when you're doing broadcasts, and you got to hang on. So who's on the Buccaneer-Ram game? I'm headed out to Los Angeles. That's also some of the country will get to see that, not a lot.
That's
probably West Coast and Tampa.
Yeah, that's the game that's the team that we had in Philly last week. Adam Amin and Mark Sanchez, Bucks and Chargers. Yeah, I would imagine you're getting that in Tampa and in L.A.
Southern California, and maybe one other market or two, probably.
Yep. So you'll get Adam Amin and Mark Sanchez. Say hello to the butt fumble for us while you're out there.
I'm looking forward to being out on the West Coast and seeing what's going on there. But we've got much more on the daily with the college football ratings. Did we leave anything else out?
I got the CBS guys real quick. Let's not forget our friends over at CBS, and I will give you those real quickly here on the Last Word on Sports. Ian Eagle, Charles Davis have Chiefs and Browns, Harlan Green, Dolphins and Texans, Andrew Catalan, Tiki Barber, Jason McCourty, Ravens and Giants, Jim Nance and Romo. This is a dual week for the games of the week. They're both 425. So you got the country going to be split with that game of the week. Well, you're going to have both there. Who's going to watch the Bills and Lions or the Eagles and Steelers? Spiro and Archuleta on the Colts and the Broncos, and then Tom McCarthy, Jay Feely, Ross Tucker. They don't get a lot of work, that crew, but they're really good. McCarthy's the Phillies play-by-play guy. He does a lot of Westwood One. Ross Tucker, really smart guy. That's Patriots and Cardinals. He has the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
I love that. And again, 5 late window games, including the 2 national games, because you're right, that Bills-Lions game is very compelling as well, that most of the country will see on CBS. How about that?
Speaking of CBS, I do want to mention Army-Navy this weekend.
Yes.
They just signed a 10-year extension with CBS, so they're going to keep the game on there. Westwood One Radio has the game. It's going to be the CBS crew as well with Nestler and that whole
Gary
crew.
Danielson, correct?
So
and by the way, Army's had an amazing season now at 12-1 and winning the American Conference Championship game in doing so. Can Navy in the rivalry game beat them after this kind of season? It's remarkable what Army has done. Those scenes from West Point the other night, they're hosting a conference title game and winning it. Yeah. Mike Gill over Tulane. Incredible what Jeff Monken has done with the United States Military Academy.
By the way, Jeff Monken's name's being mentioned. We're talking college football. His name's being mentioned for the West Virginia job, along with Anthony Beck, Rich Rodriguez. Bill Belichick, at this moment, it looks like has accepted the UNC job. So we'll see if it's out of the media.
There is one report, but I'm waiting for here we go again. I'm waiting for a Schefter. I'm waiting for somebody with the big weight, Ian Rappaport, Jay Glazer, somebody like that has it. So stay tuned.
It's not official, but a lot of people are saying that he has accepted. It's now up to UNC. Apparently part of the terms were that his son gets to be the coach in waiting, and they've accepted that, and they just need to figure it all out. But it looks like Bill Belichick is going, and who knew this, back to his alma mater.
Yeah, North Carolina. And again, his father was an assistant coach there as well. By the way, I'm looking at 2 insiders saying the deal is not done. They are still talking. And I'm not so sure Bill Belichick wants to be in college football and isn't using this for leverage to get back in the NFL, to have somebody wanting him this badly. Stay tuned. We've covered a bunch. I know you guys.
Are we going to miss Bill Belichick if he leaves the media?
Well, that's a great question. He's everywhere with the McAfee show, the Manning Cast on Monday nights, inside the NFL. He's been everywhere except, as I like to say, with Rachel Ray on the Food Channel at this point. But we'll see. We'll see if Belichick takes that job. Anything else? I think we're good. And you got to get on the radio here in a little while as we do this on a Tuesday and get ready for the screaming Eagle fans and everybody else that's going to be combative on your show in Atlantic City on 97.3 ESPN and the Sports Bash. Are we good for sports media?
I would imagine. I mean, we probably could keep on going, but we have the Daily tomorrow if something comes up.
And again, ratings from the college football weekend I'm curious about as well. Mike, great stuff. There's Mike Gill. Follow him again at Mike Gill Show. Follow me at Buck Sideline Guy. Go to Mike Gill's YouTube page, Mike Gill Show YouTube page to see us. Find it on Pod as well, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. You've been with us on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast.